It has been a moment of generosity on the part of Pa Daddy, helping me to meet many people. And so that is how life humanities, for example, we are talking about networking and other issues, many important ideas in which we are talking about internationalization of education. But this networking is animated through meetings like this. And in fact, in our digital age, as digital is a companion to us, and also there is a significance of the digital in the religious field today. But the digital and the personal and the ecological, they dance together. And it is that spirit and that spirit of being together, this spirit of selfless love and interaction, which embodies the work of Pa Daddy. And another thing also we should not forget that he's a loving translator. And in fact, inspired by him, I wrote a poem. And the last line is where translation is our prayer. Because in Indonesia, ajan or prayer is a very beautiful, spontaneous part of life here, as spontaneous as singing of the bird. Every morning we rise up, we listen to the songs of the bird. Similarly, the ajan here. And in our Islamic life, 5 times prayer is part of our life. So, in fact, humanities has to make us realize, as Mircea Eliade, Dr. Diana spoke about Mircea Eliade a month ago, and Eliade's work on myth and the sense of transcendence. So, one problem of crisis of humanities and humanities is the crisis of lack of a living relationship with transcendence. So therefore, how do we, therefore, ajan, our prayer is we do as Swami Vivekananda said, we pray while we are working and we pray while we are walking. Similarly, translation as a mode of prayer. And this inspiration I got by speaking with Pa Daddy. And then we are joined by Professor Nirmal Selvamani. He's a deep thinker and also a silent worker and cultivator of ideas. And just 4 days ago, his very important book, Tinai, has been published. Tinai, an indigenous way of life in the Anthropocene. We take this opportunity to congratulate Professor Nirmal Selvamani. Name of the book is Tinai Philosophy, the Indigenous Life Way for the Anthropocene. So, so therefore, in our interlinked symposium today, Pa Daddy would speak about dimension of religion and society from his research work on the Hajj pilgrimage. And then Professor Nirmal Selvamani would tell us about the state of the humanities today. And he also has wrote a very important issue, a very important essay more than 10 years ago called Thinking About Humanities Eco-Theoretically. Eco-criticism has been a very important area of work of Professor Nirmal Selpamani. And in fact, Pa Daddy is also interested in eco-theology. In fact, Green Islam, he has been associated with a book called Green Islam. So therefore, eco-criticism in humanities and eco-theology in the religious field, now they are coming together. So with this prefatory remark, now I welcome Professor Nirmal Selvamani has joined.
Sorry
So
about the technological snag.
and I just said that we are congratulating you for your new book, Tinai Philosophy, the Indigenous Life Way for the Anthropocene, and what a great journey it has been. As we recall, it is a work of almost 30 years of your dedicated work, bringing all these things together and how important it is. And therefore, philosophy, anthropology, religious studies, they dance together to be with our world. So, with these prefatory words, now I invite Pa Daddy Dharmandi, please. And Pa Daddy would speak around 20-25 minutes, and then followed by Professor Nirmal Selvamani, who might take a little slight more time. And then we would have discussion. So I invite Pak Dadi, please, and then discussion would be nurtured by Minati and also Randhir together. So now, Pak Dadi, please.
Well, thank you so much, Prof. Ananta. Uh, good evening, colleagues and friends from India and also all over the world. My name is Dadi Darmadi. I'm a researcher at the Center for the Study of Islam and Society here at the Syarif Hidayatullah State Islamic University in Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much for others for joining this session. Today, I'm very excited to just share my research on the contemporary Hajj and the ways it is being reshaped by state institutions, religious authorities, and long-standing trans-regional networks. My research on Hajj, uh, tentatively called the Hajj Reinvented, Pilgrimage Mobility and Interstate Organization in Saudi Arabia and Indonesia, examines how the contemporary Hajj Islamic pilgrimage has transformed into a highly organized, bureaucratic, and interstate system, and how traditional Islamic authority, like those Javanese Kiais in Indonesia, they are religious scholars and leaders and educators who have established traditional Islamic institutions in Java and elsewhere in Indonesia, and their networks called pesantren, how they adapt within this new landscape of Islamic pilgrimage. And when you're talking about the Hajj, the obligatory pilgrimage among Muslims in Indonesia, Haji has become one of the world's most elaborate state-managed religious systems, with Saudi Arabia coordinating the movement of more than 2 million foreign pilgrims in 2020 through a quota regime system that allocates slots to over 160 countries at roughly 1,000 pilgrims per million citizens. That is based on the quota system managed by the Organization of Islamic Countries. And nowhere is this transformation more visible than in Indonesia. Indonesia being the world's largest Muslim majority nation, which receives the largest national Hajj quota, totaling 221,000 pilgrims in 2023, and just last year, totaling 2,000 and 30,000 pilgrims in the 2024, yet still maintains a waiting list, Indonesia, that can stretch 20 to 30 years in several provinces like South Sulawesi, Aceh, South Kalimantan, and East Java. And why did that happen? Well, because the demand always exceeds the capacity. Indonesian pilgrims must navigate a multi-layered bureaucracy involving the Ministry of Religious Affairs from the central government to the local provinces. Pilgrims must also navigate state-owned banks managing mandatory Hajj saving account, and also licensed travel operators, and so on and so forth. While in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi authorities require digital visas nowadays. health clearances, and compliance with crowd control protocols that deploy over 100,000 personnel across many different sites in Mecca and Medina, where density can exceed 6 people per square meter in places like Arafah and Mina, at the center of the Hajj rituals for about a week or so. And now, when we talk about the financial resources in the Islamic pilgrimage, the financial scale is also equally striking, where Indonesia's Hajj ecosystem manages billions of dollars through the Hajj Financial Management Agency. We call it in Indonesia called BPKH, as well as individual pilgrims pay between 5,000, 7,000 to even more, up to 10,000 US dollars, depending on region and the package tier they have. So within this interstate system, the Hajj has been highly uh, a bureaucratic religious system. However, uh, traditional Islamic authorities, Indonesian ulama, pesantren networks, and mass organizations like Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, um, I see they have adapted to this religious bureaucracy uh, by issuing standardized guidance aligned with Saudi regulations, even as their interpretive authority becomes increasingly entangled with logistical protocols, risk management algorithm, and bilateral negotiations that determine who may perform the pilgrimage and under what conditions. And as I'm learning anthropological theories and ethnographies, the Hajj has often been imagined as a timeless ritual. But today, at least the way I see it in Indonesia and Saudi Arabia, the Hajj has been shaped by state regulation, state systems, and even bilateral uh, uh, relationship between the host and the sending countries, shaped by quotas, by visa regime, logistical infrastructures, and even diplomatic negotiations, where this is not a secret anymore that every year Saudi authorities would invite and had discussion with emissaries from many different Muslim countries to talk about Hajj quota negotiations. So in this case, I wanted to understand how this system really works and what happens to traditional religious actors like the Javanese kiais and the networks of pesantren all over Indonesia, um, within this new uh, landscape of Islamic pilgrimage. And through multi-sited ethnography in Indonesia and also in Saudi Arabia, uh, for a few months I spent there in Saudi Arabia, I found that uh, religious scholars, traditional religious scholars like Kiais and their pesantren network, do not lose authority under modernity. Instead, they adapt. They embed themselves in government ministries, travel agencies, and Saudi Tawafa pilgrim guide organizations. They become what I call as indispensable intermediaries, linking pilgrims, markets, and states. And I call this process as interpenetration, where state and non-state actors hybridize rather than replace one another. For those who are familiar with classical anthropological theories on pilgrimage. Of course, um, I would be happy to share that I learned so much from Victor Turner's pilgrimage theory, but also I learned a little bit about Eric Hobsbawm and Ranger's ideas of invention of tradition, Clifford Geertz's brokerage of religious matters in Java in his study in Java in 1950s and 60s, as well as other contemporary anthropologists from Talal Assad, Sabah Mahmoud, and my own advisor at Harvard, Professor Eng Seng Ho's idea on inter-Asian mobilities. Now, these theories and perspectives uh, allows me to show how the Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca is simultaneously a modern bureaucratic system, but also at the same time, it's a continuation of older trans-regional Indian Ocean networks, if you will, of travel of people, mobilities of people from uh, Nusantara uh, areas in the Southeast Asia and the modern state of Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and southern Thailand, perhaps. Networks of travel, scholarships, and trade, and the pilgrimage. I try to map Saudi Indonesian pilgrimage nexus and learn so much from um many things that I can document the social stratification of pilgrimage experiences and show how states outsource religious governance to pseudo state actors like those alumni of pesantren's and kiai networks who help uh, the processes in which pilgrims are um, involved uh, in pursuing the religious pilgrimage to Mecca. So overall, in this research, I argue that the Hajj is continually reinvented through the interplay of state power, at least in Indonesia. We have the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and we have our own Directorate General who coordinate all uh, official and unofficial pilgrimages from the Hajj to Umrah. And even the current government of President Prabowo's under President Prabowo's administration, we have a new ministry called Ministry of Hajj. So the interplay of state power, religious authority, and global mobility, um, and that uh, doesn't diminish the traditional Islamic networks, where the Kiai Pesantren networks remain central to its organization of Hajj in Indonesia. So, with that background in mind, I really hope that my research contributes to the anthropology of religion, Islamic studies, mobility studies, and the study of state religion, as I uh, really enjoy the conversation with Professor Ananta while he's here in Jakarta, Indonesia. Along the way, our meetings from Monday to Friday at our newly established university called UI3 or Triple IU Universitas Islam International Indonesia. I study so much from him and really enrich my understanding of the study of state and religion relations in the contemporary world. So uh, I think um, um, I finish that, uh, Professor Ananta, and would be happy to hear comments and feedbacks and also perhaps questions from everyone in the room. Thank you. Good evening.
Uh, Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your kind and very deep invitation to understand this religiosity and its interconnections. Thank you so much. Now I
Thank you.
request Dania to share her reflections on presentation.
Sorry. Can I may I start with the reflection?
Yes, sure, sure.
Okay. Sorry, I did not understand my name well. So, well, thank you very much for this presentation. I mean, it's very insightful, precisely because, from my perspective, the contribution to the mobility studies from the perspective of pilgrimage is very relevant. I mean, it's a part I did not arrive yet to consider because I was in a sort of way I was a little bit scared about uh, trying to enter into the subject of religion and state from the perspective of mobilities. But I bring and I used to writings of Mahmoud Mandami and Talal Asad a lot. And I was wondering if you consider this idea of pilgrimage and religion and um, the motivations and interests and essentials of people um to uh, to be mobile from this perspective, if you have considered it like um, a way to let's say um, um, regard the state differently than it is. I mean, from let's say a Western point of view, the state has. I would like to explain the question in order not to be understood. So, in Western belief, the state has this extraction ability towards the individual. Now, religion cannot be considered like a system to have an extraction mobility and possible capability. And from the point of view of Islam, maybe things are a little bit different. But from the point of view of the possibility of the individual to express himself by mobilizing himself for a purpose of pilgrimage, for expressing the ideals of his humanity in a religious way, then maybe this uh, this implication of the state, this interpretation that you were talking about, is very interesting if we consider how, for example, in the past, the state wanted that people should not be mobile, but they should be fixed. Actually, Mandami, if you remember, he was talking about how the state, for example, in Africa, contributed to pastoralists to become agro-pastoralists. So he wanted to control them better in a way. So pilgrimage is something like you leave people not to be controlled. So I think in this case, do you think the state is has thought that it is better from political interests to 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 intervene, or it is something that it is because behind the state that there were the people that actually believed and wanted to continue realizing their ideals and having their traditions and rituals um, continued. This would be my first reflection and my first thought about this. I mean, it's very, very interesting, and it's very important, like theme. It's very important, and I thank you so much, because I realized that in my research I did not actually consider this part of religion, which is very important in the case of mobility. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I request Professor Nirmal to share his presentation. And dear and respected friend, we'll have question answer session at the end of the session. So I request you to please be with us. Yes, Professor Nirmal Selvamani.
Thank you. Ananta, Mr. Randir, Ms. Minati, and the other presenter, Professor Dadi. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing his name properly. And the others who are participating in this session. Well, my presentation is about the humanities, and my title is From the Humanities to Puttinai Studies. By Puttinai is a Tamil word which means new Tinai. In my presentation, you will find out what I mean by Tinai, but for a start, I could say that it's a life way that preceded the state society historically, but still, now you can find it mostly among the indigenous people, whom we call Adivasis in India, Aboriginal people in Australia, or the First Nations people in Canada, or the American Indians in the US, people roughly, called tribal people. So that's what, Puttinai is new kind of, a new interpretation of that Tinai concept. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So in this brief presentation, I propose only to moot an idea concerning the humanities rather than argue my position thoroughly. The idea is this: the humanities are inadequate because they are about a dismembered human whose organic wholeness is not possible without A, what a human agent stands over against, and B, the context in which the human becomes a possibility. If what the human stands over against is munnilai, a Tamil word which means the patient of an action, the one that is acted upon, what is identified as the human in the humanities is only a tanmai, which means an agent, and context in which the human becomes a possibility. And this context in Tamil we call padarke. This context or padarke includes three entities: the locational padarke or context, which consists of place and time; the generative padarke, which includes all natural cultural entities that occupy that place and time. And these entities are generative because they produce ideas and feelings in the agent and also affect her will. The third aspect of padarke is the axiological one, which includes the ultimate value the Tamil people call anbu or love, the transcendental persona known as Uyarnda Pal, which literally means the transcendental division of which the soul of the agent is a part. Tanmay, or the agent, munnilai, the patient of any action, and Padarke, the context, are the three personae, not persons, but personae, which constitute not only the human, but all beings capable of agency. These three personae are interrelated, and each is a possibility only in its relation to the other two. Such a personaic triad could also be called a Athene, which could be understood as a family or home. There is no moment when these three personae do not interact. Unfortunately, our present life way is not based on such a philosophical anthropology. The result, the present Anthropocenic crisis that threatens all lives, including the Homo sapiens. The present epoch is called the Anthropocene because it is the age of the Anthropos, who's responsible for impacting the earth in a way no other creature has ever dared to, and alter the global climate itself perilously. If such an anthropos is the dismembered one who stands in an anarchic relationship to his munnile or the patient, and padarke, the context, such a relationship is altine or no tine, because the negative dominance of the anthropos is in fact a kind of failed dominance. It's a kind of dominance which backfires disastrously. Typical failed dominance is exemplified in what goes by the name of development or even sustainable development. In the late 1970s, more than a decade before Arturo Escobar's critique of development, Encountering Development, The Making and Unmaking of the Third World, his book appeared. I was ardently campaigning for what I called de-development, which is currently called degrowth. The way forward is, I think, not messing with development, but focusing on the normative tine. Non-Tamil scholars need not be intimidated by the fact that the theory of tine is found in Tamil language and sources, because now there is plenty of material available in English also. In the case of the humanities, this discourse has to address the organically whole human, who's a tine, a home, which is the subject of Puttine studies. The remedy is not interdisciplinarity or crossbreeding in order to yield new disciplines like eco-humanities, which also goes by the name environmental humanities, and humanistic approach to biological or physical sciences. We need to actually redefine the very discourse called the humanities. There is something about this discourse which makes it inadequate somehow. Miller and Spellmayer, in their 2006 book, The New Humanities Reader, have pointed out in a kind of Baconian spirit that the discourse of the humanities cannot be mere knowledge of particular fields anymore, but should redefine itself as, I quote, the human dimension of all knowledge, end quote. They reimagine a discourse they call the new humanities, which will not engage with specialized abstract knowledge anymore, but focus on a practical art of living, essential for humans to take charge of their lives and deal with everyday issues. Evidently, these scholars point to the irrelevance of the humanities rather than redefine it. It is no consolation that the new humanities is not the culprit who will cause another Anthropocene, but it could worsen the present crisis that looms large over all lives on Earth, as it is based on the Anthropos. newness of the humanities is not what we ought to seek, but an alternative to it. Mikhail Epstein, in his 2012 book, The Transformative Humanities, a Manifesto, perceived a major lack in the humanities. He argues that the natural sciences study nature and technology. Their practical arm, namely technology, transforms nature into objects of human interest. Similarly, the social sciences study the human society and politics, and their practical arm, namely politics, transforms the society into polities as humans want them to be. But in the case of humanities, which study culture, they do not have a practical arm to transform culture into cultural practices, artistic movements, new disciplinary fields, new institutions, new lifestyles, and new intellectual communities. Therefore, he proposed a new field, transformative humanities, which he hoped would serve its intended purpose. Despite being a brilliant critique of the humanities, especially in relation to the social sciences and the sciences, Epstein's transformative humanities is only concerned about the applicability of the abstract ideas of the discourse. It exhorts us to focus on translating the abstract into the concrete. Now, what good does it do if the abstract elements of the discourse are themselves problematic? What if they are inherently anthropocenic rather than elements which help us find a way out of this epoch? Concerned about the inherent inadequacy of the humanities, Gary Snyder, in his 1995 book, A Place in Space, Aesthetics and Watersheds, New and Collected Prose, proposed what he called pan-humanities, which in his view will integrate the human and what he called the non-human, and proposed it as an alternative to the current humanities, which he wrote, I quote, would take the whole long Homo sapiens experience into account and eventually make an effort to include our non-human kin. It would transform itself into a post-human humanism, which would defend endangered cultures and species alike, I end quote. Elsewhere, Snyder builds up on this idea in the following manner. I quote him again. There is no name yet for a humanistic scholarship that embraces the non-human. I suggest, in a spirit of pagan play, we call it pan-humanism, I end quote. More than either new humanism or the transformative humanities, Snyder's pan-humanism gets closer to putting the finger on the real issue, the problematic idea of the human. But how will the humanities embrace the human? Specifically, which idea of the human? Which philosophical anthropology will inform the humanities? The idea of the human has been contested from within the humanities, especially by philosophers and theorists. Significant contribution has been made in this direction by Hegel, Heidegger, and Derrida. One of the first thinkers to contest it was Hegel, whose dialectic method challenged the dualistic conception of the human as the subject over against the object. He redefined the subject as, I quote, the self-conscious, self-legislating social actor, which is both corporate and individual, including, for example, states, families, and individuals, provided they are free agents, who, I end quote, who in his day, I mean, the social actors did not include women and children. Hegel's subject is not a member of the dualistic set of subject and object, but one of the dialectic triad, a social subject which emerges out of the dialectical tension between the individual subject and the corporate subject. Nietzsche, and Freud have also critiqued the idea of the human in their own ways. Nietzsche showed that good, evil, truth, and falsehood are not absolute binary categories, and the dualistic conception of them is inherited from what he called the blood aristocracies. As for Freud, he debunked the legitimation of the rational over the irrational. In short, Nietzsche and Freud menaced the hierarchical, ontological, dualist paradigm. In Derrida's view, the idea of the human in the human sciences is a logos, a center which stands in need of deconstruction. With the conceptual tools, namely difference and play, he destabilizes the different types of logos, including the human. To him, recourse to the dualist notion of center and non-center, or play and no play, would mean reverting to the metaphysics of presence, negating difference and play. To Derrida, it is this metaphysics which is problematic. It is this metaphysics which postulates the ideas of, I quote, man and humanism, the name of man being the name of that being, who throughout the history of metaphysics or of ontotheology, in other words, throughout his entire history, has dreamed of full presence, the reassuring foundation, the origin and end of play, I end quote. The human had dreamt all along in history of closing the play in self-definition by imagining one center or the other, like Platonic eidos, which is idea, or logos, or Cartesian cogito, and Husserlian consciousness, among others. The Derridian definition of the human will be an indefinite project. In relation to the other, the human is neither fully present, as in normative dualism, nor partially, as in a state of solipsistic monism, but stands in what we may call a disrupted dualist relation. Another philosopher who menaced the traditional ontic dualism was Heidegger. He spent much of his life deliberating on the concept of the human through the German term Dasein. In his most well-known 1927 text, Being and Time, he redefines the human as being in the world, a being whose relation to the world is not the same as that between objects and their locations, like water in the cup or garment in the cupboard, but a kind of constitutive relation. He takes the Hegelian idea of the social subject further by obliterating the boundary between the human and the world. By a sort of linguistic legerdemain, he hyphenates the human and the world by making the being of the former participate in the very nature of the world. Such a paradigm is that of differentiated continuity, and this new one he articulated probably builds on the earlier ideas such as the dialectic of Hegel. Though Derrida speaks of the destruction, spelled with K-T-I-O-N, of Western metaphysics, that's the destruction of Western metaphysics discussed by Heidegger, Derrida does not say anything about the paradigmatic shift effected by the latter. The paradigm of differentiated continuity makes distinctiveness possible. In the case of the human, this paradigm allows us to distinguish a human from all else that is not human. But such difference has limited usefulness, such as identify someone as so-and-so. But if we problematize difference and raise the question as to what in a human could be identified as the agent, we are soon out of our depths. Consider, for example, the question, where does a human begin and end? To many of us, this is an absurd question because we take it for granted that a human is enclosed within a body, being the boundary of a single person. Such a human is a psychosomatic individual, the type of human presupposed by all the humanities disciplines, including theory and ecological humanities. Several limitations of the humanities, which have caused concern among scholars, can be traced to the presupposition I've discussed above. Contesting the notion that a human is a single entity or an individual, Neil Averndon, an eco-critic, avers that a human is in fact a colony of several organisms. Because our bodily organs depend on the food and the air that are not part of the body itself, but what lie outside of it, he asks, I quote, is not our body continuous with the food we eat and the air we breathe? I end quote. What about the genes that make up our body? They contain substance that's not part of us, but of our ancestors. If so, are not the ancestors continuous with us? If the food and air are part of what we normally call nature, the genetic material inherited from the ancestors is ancestral. Since the ancestor is not physically present, but spiritually through the somatic elements, the genetic material is not wholly physical. It is partly spiritual. Similarly, a human is not a, shall I say, discrete individual. From a Puttine perspective, the human, who is nothing less than a home, a Tine, an oikos, a personate triad constituted not only by what we conventionally consider human, but also by what we do not consider human. For example, treeness. The following ancient Tamil song exemplifies this idea. Let me first, recite the Tamil, and then I will give you a translation. Because, poems or songs often, depend much on the sound, and that's found only in the language in which it is composed. So here is the Tamil song. விளையாடும் ஆயமொடு வெண் மணல் அழுத்தி மறந்தனம் துறந்த காழ்முளை அகைய நெய் பெய் தீம்பால் பெய்து இனிது வளர்ப்ப நும்மினும் சிறந்தது நுவ்வையாகுமென்று அன்னை கூறினள் பொன்னையது நலனே ஹம்ம நாணுதோ நும்மொடு நகையே விருந்தின் பாணர் விளரிசை கடுப்ப வலம்புரி வான்கோடு நரலும் இலங்கு நீர் துறைகள் கொண்க நீ நல்கின் இறைபடு நீழல் பிறவுமார் உளவே. And here is A.K. Ramanujan's translation of this song. Playing with friends one time, we pressed a ripe seed into the white sand and forgot about it till it sprouted. And when we nursed it tenderly, pouring sweet milk with melted butter, mother said, it qualifies as a sister to you, and it's much better than you, praising the laurel tree. So we are embarrassed to laugh with you here, O man of the seashore with glittering waters, where white conch shells their spirals turning right sound like the soft music of birds at a feast. Yet, if you wish, there is plenty of shade elsewhere. Now, this is what a girlfriend was telling her boyfriend, that they cannot be standing underneath that particular tree, the Alexandrian laurel tree, because that happens to be her own sister. So you can see the continuity between the human and this tree. As the human is continuous with beings other than human, traditional humanities will have to be completely recast, I think, into a new domain of study, which will be about the human who is nothing less than Athene or home. It's our come round at last, casting off the slough of humanities, social sciences and natural sciences. The new rough beast Puttine studies already slouches towards the academia. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. As always, it is very insightful, and it's a pleasure to listen to you all your lectures. And once more, I must say congratulations for your new book. So now we will invite the people who are participating should put their queries. May I invite Professor Ganluigi? Over to you, Ganluigi, sir.
Yes, I think that I have some problems with the video. Excuse me, but I am completely in the darkness. I am sorry. I don't know what is happening to my computer, but it is
Yeah,
a
I
problem
can't
of my
see you.
it is a problem of my computer. Yes, it is a little bit. So, thank you very much. No, it was very interesting. Very, very interesting. I could take very many notices. I have no particular question to pose, to ask, because I was reflecting on the content, but it was very interesting. I thank you very much. I think perhaps other people could put some questions. In the meantime, perhaps I try to resolve these problems which I have with my computer. Uh, because I think that I have also a problem with the audio or with the volume. I do not know what is happening. I am sorry. I thank you very much. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So both the speakers, I would request to just write down the reflections or any queries. At the end, we would invite both of you to speak on that. May I now invite Diana, Dr. Diana? Diana, please. If you have any, reflection or query. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this presentation and congratulations for the book. I would
Thank
be interested to buy it if it is available somewhere, because I think it's a subject that is very important but very difficult to understand in such a short time, unfortunately. Uh, if you will have time and you would like, I would kindly ask you if you could repeat again, because it's very interesting. You said about the interpretation of Tene, and in the three directions, you said the locational one, place and time together, and then you said the natural cultural entities that occupy time, and the
Right.
axiological one. I think I did not understand well. If you would please take a little bit this central concept. Sorry.
Thank you very much for that lovely question. Actually, I was trying to translate the Tamil, the theory of Tine, which first occurs in probably the most ancient grammatical text called Tolkappiyam in Tamil. So that's the text where we have the theory of Tine. And we have plenty of ancient songs which are collected into two, anthologies. One is called the 10 Songs. The Tamil name is Pattu Paattu. And then we have the 8 anthologies, Ettu Togai. So those songs actually are illustrative of this theory. Like, if you want to know what Tine is, if you read these songs, you will find the ideas exemplified in those songs. So my understanding of Tine primarily comes from these sources. So in Tolkappiyam, Tine, the elements which, out of the elements which constitute Tine, one of the most important thing is Mudal, which means the primary. And this primary is basically place time. And the second element is called the generative element. So all of the natural cultural elements which occupy that place time are the generative ones. And then you have, the ultimate values, which is called the Mudal Porul. Now, the place time, I have used the English word locative, to convey this idea. That is, I said I'm talking about 3 personae: the Tanmai, which is the agent, the patient, which is Munnilai, and Padarkai, which is the context. So the patient and the agent can interact. For example, in this conversation, right now, at this moment, I am the Tanmay and you are my Munilai, because I'm talking to you. And both of us, we share a context, which is the Padarke. Now, this Padarke has three basic aspects. One is the locational aspect, that is the place time that we occupy. And also, I mean, this place time is not empty. It is filled with, so many entities. And Tolkapian says these are natural cultural entities. That is things that, we didn't produce and things that humans have produced. So these constitute that, these occupy that location, and they are generated because they generate feelings and ideas in our minds. And there is also the invisible part of that context, which is the site, or shall we say the locus of the values which you and I share right now, which kind of govern this relationship that's going on right now here in this conversation. So these are the three basic aspects that I was talking about. Which constitute the context.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So now may I invite Mr. Iskandar Ibrahim. Over to you, please. You can unmute and share your reflections.
Thank you, Dr. Minati. So I'm here as a participant. So I'm just listening. I heard I got a lot of insight from Dr. Nirmal Selvanoni and from Dr. Diana as well. And I think this Tinai philosophy is very, very new for me. And I would like to read more about new book, Doctor, about this Tinai philosophy.
Sure.
Then,
thank you. Yeah.
And I think with the in the modern time, like today's, this practical is still relevant, and the as I think it's very insight, and I don't know about this Tinai philosophy. I just heard about in this event, so I just would like to know: is this still how to say it, is it like a community or the people who live in some area of Tinai that become this this concept? Would you please elaborate more about how this Tinai philosophy become sustained so people can practice until now? Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Well, Tinai has many meanings, and in this context, I'm using mainly the meaning of home, the life way of that home. Those are the two meanings I'm particularly focusing on. It has other meanings as well, but when I say home, it's sort of an interspecific home. That is, it's not just a human home, but it is the basic home of which, a human is a member. So everyone, is in a Tinai, normatively, but actually, historically speaking, around 10,000 or 9,000 years ago, the state societies emerged, and the Tinai life way was disrupted very greatly. And later, with industrialism around 18th century, it was further, disrupted. But before 10,000 BC, that is before the Holocene, what geologists would call the Holocene. Before that, in the pre-Holocene, epoch, I think all of the people all over the world were living a Tinai life way, in which there was harmony, among all the members of this home, which includes plants, animals, birds, So all of that constitute a home. So that's the idea. I mean, that's the meaning that's, I think, very relevant to this discussion right now. So it is in this sense that I'm saying. But Tinai can also refer to communities of people, who live this kind of a life. So you find this more in the case of the indigenous people rather than mainstream people like me and you. So people who hunt and gather, people who forage, who don't depend on irrigated cultivation, agriculture or industries. People we call tribal people. So they still, I mean, of course, there are so many different types of tribal people at various degrees of sophistication and mainstreaming, but the normative, tribal people, among them, you can find this life way even today. Uh, so, I mean, that's for a start, but there's much more to say. I hope it helps. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir. Now, Mr. Mokardhoj, would you like to ask something or to share something?
Thank you, madam. It's interesting to listen about the indigenous way of living in the Tamil Nadu context. It's very interesting, and this work is uh, very significant at the moment when the debate around the rationalities is uh, going on, and this work will very important for the further study, for further research, and for the uh, for the scholars, those who are at the early stage of their research, and where the importance dimension that we learn from this lab for this from this talk is that the importance of the spirituality and religions which mostly embedded with the indigenous people and which embedded the rationality as well as the subjectivity, which is something distinctively different from the Western way of understanding the religion. So that is very, very important dimension, sir, that you have reflected throughout your talk. That is, I learned, and I think this is something that again I'm also interested to read more about this through in your book, and very interesting, sir. Thank you so much. This is what I like to reflect, but no question. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your observations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Randhir, then Anant Bhai. Hello, Randhir. Hello, Randhir. Can you hear me? Or else, Anant Bhai, can you please share your reflections?
Yes, thank you. So thank you, Padari and Nirmal. And for example, I was thinking, what are the processes of pilgrimage, for example, in the Tinai life world? Because the notion of the sacredness and the Tinai and the five layers, of the Tinai world, the plain world, the Kurunchi, the Malay, and these different levels, whether it also has a dimension of pilgrimage, that one moving to the Malay, to the mountain as an aspect of pilgrimage. And secondly, the Tinai world is a interconnected world, but it also has challenges of difference and and what is the challenges of differentiation and domination, exploitation, because in our primary world, I'm not saying primitive, but primal world, there are also issues of leadership, chieftainship, the issue of gender, division of labor, and all these things have questions of dignity and how these issues of life, power, exclusion are also there in the Tinai world. In what way people are coping with it? The relationship between power and ethics. For example, we can read Tiruvalvur, the great philosopher and poet, from creating an ethical worldview. But that ethical worldview, how does it interact with power? So with Pa Daddy, thank you. And you also mentioned about that how at one time, this Hajj was part of a kind of the eternal moment. It was a different space and time. And today it has been bureaucratized. So in that space of bureaucratization, what are the kind of creative responses that are coming? And how people are remembering another time when it was much more free and much more spiritual. And today, of course, with the bureaucratic also, the spiritual touch is also an important dimension. So how in the present day time, then you also mentioned about the issue of money, that people have to arrange a lot of money, like maybe 10,000 US dollar, and how that is happening, the political economy of it, and whether those people who are not able to arrange this money, how they are feeling, and whether there are also other support groups. For example, today there are many kinds of religious forces are working in Indonesia. I just get a sense that there are also Saudi linked religious forces, educational forces, and whether uh, there are transnational religious forces which may would like to sponsor a pilgrimage, but then on the way, then they might demand a particular kind of ideological orientation, like, for example, the Wahhabi, and because in Indonesian society, these are the challenges. So, some reflections from you on this, please. Thank you, Pa Daddy, and thank you, Professor Nirmal Selvam.
I have one query. Just I will just say that thanks to Paddy and Professor Nirmal Salvamani for this very, very insightful presentation. I was about to ask the question. Okay, anyway, Anantbhai asked, but I wanted to ask that, how does to the both the speaker that same question? No, how does the rise of this globalized what you say things that impact our local identities, language, and tradition, and what balance must be struck between the global integration? That is one query. Then one more query is to Professor Salvamanisha. So what is the relationship between the Tinnai philosophy, neuroscience, and free will? Is there anything we can just think on this issue? So these were my
Can you
two
say,
humble
can you
queries.
say that
Thank you.
again? Between Tinay and free will and what?
Tinnai, neuroscience and free will.
Uh-huh.
Neuroscience and free
Okay.
will.
Okay. Mhm.
So and this that what Anandbhai was asking, actually that is the same thing. I mean, like on the gender, then this climate crisis, and how does one get fitted into the this globalized um, culture impact to preserve our local identities, language, and tradition, and what balance must be found between this, in this global integrated time. So these were my two questions. Thank you.
So Dadi could go first.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you
Dr.
so much.
Dadi.
Thank you. I'm really sorry that I cannot show my video because the gadget that I'm using for this Zoom is the battery is draining. I'm really sorry. So
That's fine.
yeah. But thank you so much, Professor Ananta, for your thoughtful comments and feedbacks and some questions. And also, before that, thank you to Dr. Diana Svetlana Stoika for your reflection on, especially on Mahmoud Mamdani's work on mobilities in Africa and the how it helps pastoral communities there. And I think I would like to have a second look to these important ideas to help strengthen my own understanding of the Islamic pilgrimage. I don't know if I can answer directly to the comments and questions from Professor Ananta, but one of the most striking findings of my research is that despite the globalized bureaucracy of Islamic pilgrimage and all the globalization that comes within this sphere of religious rituals among Muslims, the traditional religious networks do not decline under whatever we call it uh, burgeoning bureaucracy, modernity, uh, and so on and so forth. And non-state actors, um, they adapt to the situation. And I argue that this persists because they become embedded within the bureaucratic system itself, where, for example, the kiais and alumni of pesantrens, they become lead pilgrim groups. They advise on logistics on Hajj. They even navigate administrative procedures in the provincial and cities uh, level. And some of them mediate between pilgrims and state officials. Uh, and of course, they can maintain long-standing ties with the Tawafa Mutawif organizations, especially for those who Pesantren alumni who studied in Saudi Arabia and other countries as well. In other words, these traditional scholars, they become pseudo-state actors. They operate within the system, not outside the state. And in 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 the context of Indonesia-Saudi Arabia relations, the Hajj pilgrimage has been a site of soft power, where negotiations are happening over quotas and even services also. Uh, Many of them are, of course, very deeply political, and the Saudi has modernized many different things for their projection of Saudi vision, new Saudi vision 2030. So the Hajj has also become part of that Saudi modernization project with all the new buildings circling the Masjid al-Haram or the Grand Mosque of Mecca. Really, I mean, it reshapes the spiritual geography of Mecca. And because of that, uh, many countries, including Indonesia, and those who are responsible for the management of the Hajj, like the Indonesian Ministry of Religious Affairs, um, automatically respond by many uh, efforts, including professionalizing their own pilgrimage bureaucracy. So this interstate relationship is not just administrative, I believe. It is economic, political, symbolic, cultural, and that has really shaped the way people think about Islamic pilgrimage or the Hajj to Mecca altogether. And now, uh, just one quick addition to uh, the idea of mobility among pilgrims. Um, Despite of the dominance of modern bureaucracy, I have seen all the patterns of mobility persist. By example of the Indonesian descendants, or they call it Mukimin communities in Mecca, who have traveled back and forth between uh, Dutch East Indies or Indonesia in the past during Dutch colonial times in the 18th, 19th, early 20th century. They they become descendants of these earlier Indonesian migrants in Saudi Arabia. They maintain genealogical and ritual ties that predate the modern nation state of Indonesia, which, of course, occurred uh, in 1945. So these religious networks and genealogical relationships draw on these networks of Hajj and eventually navigate the modern institutions of Hajj by the modern Saudi state. And many pilgrims, the way I see them, often see the journey not only as a state-managed trip, but also as participation. It's a much older trans-regional or Indian Ocean world between Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, South Thailand, Southern Philippines, uh, with the Arabian Peninsula. So in this case, of course, the Hajj is not just an interstate event, but as a trans-regional phenomenon shaped by this long-standing, centuries-old movement of people across the Indian Ocean. Thank you so much, Prof. Ananta, and also Diana and other friends. Thank you.
Thank
Now,
you, all of you, for your.
Randir, you can ask the questions or queries if you have any reflections.
No, thank you. It was really very enriching session. Thank you.
So now we can invite Professor Nirmal Salavuman to, to answer.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, before I start responding to the questions, I'm very happy to share with you that this Puttine theory that I was talking to you about has traveled to some countries of the world, and one of them is Indonesia, because I know that one theologian, Professor Joa, I don't know whether I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but Joas Adi Prasteya. That is I have not met.
He's my friend.
Okay, I haven't met
My
him.
friend, Joas
But,
Praditya. Yes,
he
thank you.
teaches in Jakarta Theological Seminary.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be very happy if you can provide the contact information to me. I would like to get in touch with him because he has used this theory in one of his essays. So I'm very happy to share that with you since your location right now is Indonesia. So
Okay, I have his contact number, and I will relay this information to Professor Ananta, perhaps.
Sure.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Professor.
Professor, your name, Dadi?
My name is Dadi Darmadi. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now about pilgrimage. If pilgrimage is a journey to a religious shrine, often involving some considerable distance. The Tinay people didn't really have to do that because, as you know, to almost all indigenous people, the world that they inhabited was sacred. Like, say, if it's a mountainous, community, like community inhabiting a mountain slope, the mountain itself is the spirit. So they, it is, in fact, their ancestor. Like we have, some tribal groups in the Western Ghats. They call the, mountain their father or grandfather. I mean, or some word, which will mean, a parent. And they, worship the water bodies like the ocean, the rivers, the trees, because tree is a vital member of the family. Many families are identified by the tree, which is the most revered ancestor of that family, because they believe that the spirit of the members of the family reside in that tree. So they take, that name as their family name. For example, that tradition still survives in some parts of Kerala, which was earlier actually a part of the Tamil-speaking southern peninsula of this country, also in Tamil Nadu, because my own grandfather's house was called, my grandfather was called Puliyamuttu Tata, which means grandfather who lives at the base of the tamarind tree. So the family actually is known by the tree. Now this you will see in modern Kerala also. When you say, names like Cherian Pilamutil or something like that, Cherian, who is part of a family which lives at the base of the jack tree. So tree is a part of the family, and it's right there, which they worship. So they didn't have to make long journeys to worship a particular god. And another thing is, pilgrimage often is a part of an institutional religion. Now, Tinay is not, you don't find institutional religion in Tinay, nor in, I think, any indigenous, community that is truly indigenous. You do have spirituality, people do worship ancestral spirits and so on, but there is no religion as such. If you're using the word as a kind of an institution. And about the challenges that Tinay has to face, particularly challenges regarding power, question of power, and so on. I think we need to make a distinction between the normative Tinay and the actual, let's say, a particular instance of that, life way. So there could be, of course, lapses, there could be anomalies, there could be, mistakes, there could be wrong behavior and conduct, and all of that is possible. So that's why when you talk about, when you theorize, you are only talking about the normative Tinay. So that is what, I'm also talking about. Because, in a particular indigenous group, you might find, power struggle, you might find, some, gender discrimination. These are all possibilities. But then what I'm talking about is normative Tinay. And when, as far as the evidences that I find in early Tamil songs, the lapses are quickly identified, and they are seen as lapses for what they are, and they are reprimanded. So I think that is how normative Tinay society, Tinay community faces its challenges. Thank you very much. Okay, I mean, it's also this question about free will. Yeah, like Tinai people, definitely, had no issues with, I mean, are probably, I mean, what do I say? Like, there wasn't any problem with agency in the sense you don't find the kind of bureaucracy the other speaker was talking about, all of these things which we associate with the state society, not Tinai as such. And also the idea of free will, I think it's alien to Tinai because the orientation of the action is toward the ultimate values. So everyone's will, bends in that direction. And of course, they have, I mean, there is a polity, there is governance, there are elders, who guide people, who take decisions, who solve problems and so on. So it is the community, so every human is at home. I mean, it's a community. So there is no idea of the individual. The idea of the individual is, I think, alien to Tinai. So I don't think the question of free will arises in this particular case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anant bhai, any closing remarks from you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Padadi. Thank you, Professor Nirmal Selvamani. Our ways of connecting study of religion, society, nature, and transcendence, and the concluding reflection of Professor Selvamani about the normative and the particular. It is always a challenge, but the normative is also something so constitutive of our reality. Today, the very closing of our normative world is also creating a lot of problem, and humanities study is not forgetting the many worlds that exist in our world, and therefore we would have to learn to be much more human, ecologically human and spiritually mobile. So thank you, and now Minoti.
Thank you, Anant bhai. So we can close now. So I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Swadhyasa Chakra and the Vishwanudam Center for Asian Blossoming, would like to thank our today's chief speaker, Professor Nirmal Selvamani and Professor Dadi Dharmandi. Hope I am pronouncing properly. Thank you both so much for a very insightful session. And I would also like to thank our today's participants, Dr. Diana, Stefina Stoatica, and Professor Gyanluigi, Mr. Iskandar Ibrahim, Mr. Makardoz, and the people who have joined us in our Facebook platform and as well as in our YouTube platform. Thank you all for being a co-learner in our this journey. Thank you and good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.